Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Montgomery County Veterans Memorial Court of Honor Veterans Day program. And at this time, we will host the colors.
Detail, halt! Right hand! Present colors! Present arms!
Audience, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, arms! Right face! Forward, arms!
Let's give the band another round of applause. And you'll notice we've got a new bandmaster this morning, Mr. Tim Marsden. Mr. Everly is at the honors band with a couple of two or three students, so he couldn't be here, so thank you, Tim. You may be seated. Our honored guests this morning, Master Sergeant Amanda Hill, U.S. Air Force retired, Janice Lester, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Red Oak, Larry Barnett, Chairman Court of Honor, and all veterans. We have the placing of the wreaths by the American Legion. No, I jumped ahead here. We'll have a vocal music by the junior and senior high school choirs. Thank you. That was very, very appropriate. Thank you. Well done. Now we will have the placing of the wreaths. American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and Veterans of Foreign Wars Auxiliary. Now the Veterans Court of Honor will provide the rifle salute, and with following the taps. You may be seated. Our speaker today is Master Sergeant Amanda Hill, U.S. Air Force, retired. Amanda was born and raised in Frazee, Minnesota, and graduated from Frazee High School in May of 1999 and left 37 days later to embark on her journey in the United States Air Force. Basic training was at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and then to receive technical training in aircraft fuel systems repair at Shepherd Air Force Base, also in Texas. She was assigned to Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, working on B-1B bombers for 7 years, and then to Kusan Air Base in the Republic of Korea, where she was responsible for preparing and maintaining all war readiness materials and maintaining the F-16 aircraft. Amanda was then assigned to Offutt Air Force Base in Bellevue, Nebraska, where she maintained C-135 and E-4B aircraft. In 2016, she became the flight chief of the Commander's Support Staff, which included overseeing over 300 military and civilian maintainers and overseeing hundreds of individual military personnel. Amanda retired from the Air Force in 2020, serving 21 years, during which time she maintained a busy household as a wife and mother to 3 amazing kids and continuing her education, getting 3 college degrees. After retirement, Amanda and her husband Chad moved to Red Oak. She is on the Montgomery County Board of Veterans Affairs, the treasurer of the Montgomery County Veterans Memorial Court of Honor, and an officer in the Classy Chassis Car Club. In her spare time, she likes to work on her 63 Ford Fairlane and is an animal lover. She has 2 dogs, 2 chickens, 2 guinea pigs, fish, and a duck. Would you welcome Amanda, please?
Oh, I was trying to shake your hand. Well, Bob pretty much summed up my speech, so we can all just go home now. No, just kidding about that. So good morning, everyone. I would first and foremost love to thank every one of you for taking your time to come and coming to this amazing Veterans Day program. As Bob stated, I am Amanda Hill. Most of you know me as Mandy, and I proudly served in the United States Air Force for just shy of 21 years. I retired in 2020 as a Master Sergeant, and I know a lot of you probably don't understand the military lingo. That'd be like a manager or a supervisor of a company. So, once I retired, my husband and I, we moved to Red Oak. Why Red Oak, right? We just decided that this was where we were going to set our roots, even though neither one of us are from here. Upon moving to Red Oak, I found this group, the Court of Honor, where I'm pretty active. I am also on the board for the Veterans Service Officer, so if any of you veterans need any assistance, make sure you get a hold of Curtis. He's a really great guy. So, like I said, being in the Court of Honor means a lot to me, and when Larry and I were discussing who was going to speak at today's ceremony, we threw a lot of names around. Believe it or not, Mandy Hill, was not the first choice, but we made it work. So we talked to a lot of people, and unfortunately, they were all unavailable. So Larry and I decided, let's talk to some other people, and then he said, well, wait, you're a local veteran. You're a female veteran. Let's show Montgomery County and Red Oak that veterans come in men, women, all races, and just because you're a girl, it doesn't mean you can't be a veteran. So he said, let's have you do it. And guess what? I said, you know what? I can do it, and maybe I can inspire some people. So, before I get going today on my speech, can I just, by a raise of hands, can I please see how many veterans are in the audience today? And not only the veterans, but if you have a family member that is a veteran, can you guys please raise your hands for me? That is impressive. I really want to thank every single veteran because you guys paved the way for the future of what we have today. And for those of you that raised your hands, as having a family member, you guys deserve an extra thank you as well because you guys kept the day-to-day going when our wonderful country asked us to leave and serve our country. So I contemplated for a very long time on what I was going to talk about today. It's not always easy knowing that you got to stand up in front of a bunch of students that probably don't even want to be here anyway because you guys are kind of forced to be here. So I was like, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to keep them engaged? How am I going to entice them to not secretly be looking at their telephones? What am I going to talk about? And mostly, maybe, how am I going to spark the interest of maybe just one of you students to maybe want to join the military and become a veteran one day as well? Then, as I'm sitting and thinking about all of that, holy cow, I have a half another room of an audience. I have the veterans and the civilians that are here that never served in the military, and I also need to keep their interest. Who's up to that task, right? It's not that easy. So I first thought I would talk about the history of Veterans Day and how it used to be known as Armistice Day. How President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed in 1919 that November 11th would forever be known as Armistice Day, and it would honor all of the veterans that served in World War I. Many of you are probably wondering, well, today's November 10th, tomorrow's November 11th, and it's not Armistice Day. Probably never even heard of Armistice Day. It's Veterans Day. Well, what happened in 1939? I know I have some history buffs out there. Does anybody know? What started in 1939? Well, do you know? Exactly, World War II started. Good job, I'm so proud of you for knowing that. And it lasted for about 5 years, and it ended in 1945, almost to the day. Congress was faced with some decisions at that point. Were they gonna add another holiday to the calendar? What were they gonna do? Because they needed a day to honor the veterans that now served in World War II. Were they gonna just keep adding days? Were they gonna fill the entire annual calendar with days? Because there was probably gonna be another conflict or another war. Well, it took them 9 years to figure it out, but in 1954, Congress said that November 11th would forever and always be known as Veterans Day, and it would then honor all veterans that served during wartime and during peacetime. But then I started doing the research, and I was getting excited, and I figured, well, the veterans would like to hear all of this. And then I was like, the students probably already had a history lesson. They don't want to sit through a big, long, drawn-out speech about the history of Veterans Day. So then I shifted to statistics. Because who does not love numbers? I love numbers. I bet the math teachers know who does not love numbers. Am I right, teachers? I'm sure there's a few out there. But then I was like, it's so enticing to know that in America, there are 16.5 million veterans, which makes up about 6.4% of our population. So not even 10% of our population keeps us safe and allows us to keep our freedoms. And then I was like, let's bring this home a little bit. Let's look at just Montgomery County, Iowa. There are 10,500 people that reside in Montgomery County, Iowa. About 700 veterans, give or take. This data came from 2020, which is about 6.6%, so just 0.2% higher than the national average. I stopped, I looked at my husband, and I said, if I were sitting in those seats back in 1999, I wouldn't want to listen to statistics. Scratch that idea. So I was sitting there and I'm like, well, let's talk about the difference between Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and Armed Services Day. Does everybody know there's a difference between those? Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people think that Memorial Day and Veterans Day and Armed Services Day is all about the same thing. They think it's all about just the veterans. Well, Memorial Day, it's about those who lost their lives during war or peacetime. It's a very sombering day. Armed Services Day is to honor those that are still serving today. And Veterans Day, well, that's for everybody that served in the past or the present. They're currently serving, you're a veteran. There's not a whole lot we can talk about there, so I decided, scratch that idea. At that point, I was completely lost. I had zero clue on what I was going to talk to you guys about today. I talked to a wonderful person, Bob. He's right back there. He's been talking to you all morning. And he said, talk about what Veterans Day means to you and why it's so important. So I thought about that for a few days. And then I thought back to June 30th of 1999. I know, it was so long ago. Many of you weren't even born yet. And I had come from a family that didn't have a lot of money. I had never been on an airplane before. And here I was, Mandy Hill. I was getting on an airplane, and I was heading to Lackland Air Force Base. Do we have any seniors in here? Seniors? So, my peers, they all thought I was crazy, because I left merely weeks after graduation. My friends were furious with me, and they thought I had lost my mind because it was supposed to be our summer, our last hurrah. We were going to do it up. We were going to live our lives before people went off to college and people went off to start their adult lives. Nope, not me. I knew from the moment I was in 4th grade that I had a higher purpose. I wanted to change the world. I wanted to do something bigger than go to college. I wanted to do something than work at the roofing company that I was working at. So I decided I was going to join the United States Air Force. So I left for basic training. I had no idea what my job was going to be, as that happens sometimes if you're really in a hurry to join the Air Force. I had no idea where I was going to go. I had no idea what my future held. My book was not written yet. It was completely open-ended. I arrived at Lackland Air Force Base with just a small backpack, with a few personal things along with all the required items that they tell you to bring. It's quite amazing what they ask you to bring to basic training. Who would have thought it was a lot like getting ready for school? Pens, pencils, notebooks, and then of course, undergarments, socks of a certain color. Everything's pretty white or black when you go. So I arrived at basic training in Texas in June. It's kind of warm there, and we're all standing outside with our little backpacks or suitcases. One guy had 3 suitcases, don't know why. And we all stood there, and we were all lined up in lines like we were going to lunch or something. And then they said, pick them up, put them down, pick them up, put them down. And we did that several times with our luggage until everybody got on pace. Can anybody else relate to that? Any veterans that were in basic? So it's quite fun how you have to do that. And then we went to our dorms, we showered, we got up, went to bed, got up, ate, did training, ate, did training, ate, did training, and went to bed. And we did that every single day for 6 weeks. Well, let's fast forward to August, still at basic training. So like I said, my family didn't have a lot of money, but they were determined. They were going to come down and they were going to watch me graduate from basic training from the United States Air Force. It meant a lot to me because they had to save up for that entire 6 weeks just to buy gas so they could load up in their 91 Ford Explorer and drive down to Texas from northern Minnesota. Who knows how long it took them because my mom does not speed whatsoever. Well, they got there, they watched me graduate basic training, and then I went off to Shepherd Air Force Base. And I learned how to be an aircraft fuel systems mechanic. For those of you that you don't know, I literally was learning how to climb inside fuel tanks of airplanes. And I kept them from leaking gas. I changed components to make sure that they were getting gas so they can continue to fly. So after about 7 weeks of learning all the basics, I thought I was doing really good because I learned on working on cars with my dad, so fixing things came easy. I found out that me, 18-year-old Mandy Hill, was going to be stationed at Ellsworth Air Force Base working on B-1 bombers. How cool is that? I mean, they break the sound barrier, their wings sweep so they can fly even faster so that they're not detectable, and me, an 18-year-old female, was going to be working on them and be partially responsible for keeping them in the air so they could keep us safe. Well, I arrived at Ellsworth Air Force Base on November 7th. Just a few days later, it was Veterans Day. Guess what? I didn't know many people. I had just gotten there. But we had a day off already. How cool was that? Go to your first job and you get a day off right away. And then they said, hey, it's Veterans Day. Let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's go have a free breakfast. We went to lunch somewhere for free. And then I even think we went to a steakhouse. Well, it was all about getting a free meal to me. At that point in time, it was 1999, I was 18, I was young, and I thought I was just doing my job. I thought the Air Force was my job. I would go there, I would do my job, I would go home and do what I want, and then there was a day where people just fed us for free. Veterans Day was the best. So let's fast forward just 2 short years. I was with those B-1 bombers at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. You have to remember that I joined during peacetime. There was nothing crazy, well, anything too crazy going on in the world. But those of you adults, because I know none of you guys were really born, or even a twinkle, or even a thought yet. But on September 11th, 2001, our country was attacked. I was at Nellis Air Force Base, which they thought was going to be the next target because, well, it's Las Vegas, right? Tons of population. I'll never forget that morning. That morning, there was a knock on my hotel door, and they said everybody needs to report to the foyer. And they told us that the World Trade Centers had been hit, and other places around the country had been attacked. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to war. At this point, I was 20 years old. I remember calling my husband, he's right over there, Chad, and I was terrified. Chad's also a veteran. He's also an aircraft fuel systems mechanic, but he reminded me, he's a little older than me. He'd been through some things already, but he reminded me it was our job to serve our country, and if we were called to duty, it was our job to answer. Guess what? We answered that call. Throughout my career, I deployed how many times? 30 probably. And as Bob said, I had a family and I had kids. But after September 11th, Veterans Day hit me a little bit more different. It wasn't just a free cup of coffee. It wasn't a free breakfast. And it sure the heck wasn't just a free steak. Veterans Day was a day of honor. Veterans Day was a day of remembrance. Veterans Day was a day that it was the country thanking all of the veterans for what they do. It's a day that America gives a little extra thanks. And if they feel like giving me a free cup of coffee or a free breakfast or even a free steak, you know what? I'm going to thank them for thanking us. I hope that you guys all got a little bit of something out of this speech, and I hope that I maybe sparked the interest of somebody to maybe take that leap. I do see a few familiar faces in the audience today, young kids that are active with the Court of Honor. I won't call you out, don't worry. But the Court of Honor is not just for us old veterans. Anybody's welcome to join. Anybody's welcome to help honor those veterans. But I do ultimately want to thank all of you guys for your time today, and make sure you guys thank a veteran tomorrow.
Now you know why we're so glad to have Mandy as a member of our Court of Honor. She keeps us on the straight and narrow. Now, have another selection from the band. Thank you again, Tim, for all the good music we had today. Appreciate it. Thank you. And the band members, thank you too. Just a couple of announcements. Since tomorrow is actually Veterans Day, we will put up the flags around the square at 7 o'clock in the morning. You can come out and help us, we appreciate it. And we'll take them down again tomorrow night at 4 o'clock. So thank you in advance for helping us do this. And now we'll dismiss the students first, and then the public can leave. And have a good day at school, students.